Today we're driving the 2020 Mazda MX-5 Miata. We are in a club with the BBS Brembo Bilstein package, so it's pretty fully loaded, kind of the racer spec, so to speak. We also have a cloth top, Recaro seats. We have Apple CarPlay now in a Miata, which is fantastic. Let's show you guys what this thing is like to drive and tell you what it's been like to live with this week. Actually, we've had this for 2 weeks, so we've spent quite a bit of time in this Miata and put a lot of miles on it. If you saw our last rainy track driving video, you'll know that this is a little bit of a handful, but a lot of fun in the rain. We haven't had too many grippy scenarios to drive this in the last week or so, so hopefully this morning, even though it's a little bit chilly, we'll get some time to throw it around a few corners and see what it's capable of on these Bridgestone tires in the dry. Like I said earlier, this is kind of the racer spec. If you're going to be taking your Miata to the track, autocrossing it, performance driving it, this is kind of how I would build or buy my MX-5. I think the cloth top is just a little bit nicer for, well, it's definitely kind of the only way to go if you're going to be fitting a roll bar in the car. And these Brembo brakes have plenty of stopping power in stock form. It's a little bit lighter than the RF, a little bit less expensive. This club starts at $30,000 thereabouts, and this has about $5,000 worth of options on it, from the aero kit to the BBS wheels, the Brembo brakes, the Bilstein suspension. It's about a $35,000 proposition. Definitely not cheap, but you gotta pay to play. We've done lots of videos on the new Miata, so I won't bore you with stats and details. All the specs are in the description. Let's show you what the engine bay looks like. Excuse all the leaves in the footwell. Kind of hard to avoid in the fall time. And joy of joys, we have an engine that looks like an engine. Set well behind the front axle. Mazda's 2-liter makes 181 horsepower. Really good fuel economy with the Skyactiv, 35 mpg on the highway, 26 in the city. All week we've averaged around 34 on the readout, which is pretty impressive. It's a little bit chilly this morning, so we'll probably avoid doing any top-down driving. But just to show you guys how easy this top is to take off, that's it. Done. You want to put it back up again? Pull that. It springs up, and you can literally lift it with one finger. You need no strength whatsoever to bring this up while you're in the driver's seat. That's fantastic. All right, let's go have some fun. So of course, many of you know, new for 2019, Mazda added some horsepower to this Miata. It has a higher red line, and it feels great. This is no longer the underpowered Miata of old. You've got some power to play with here. You kind of have to be careful with your right foot throttle application. This is kind of a fast car now. It's a quick car. I'm not going to say it's a fast car, but it's a quick car. You can hang with some of the big boys on track, and on the street, you kind of have to watch out on the speedometer, which is a welcome change. This is such a satisfying car to drive. The steering is light, the chassis tuning is just fantastic. The suspension, although a little bit stiff over bumps, is tuned just perfectly for performance driving. I think you could put a set of sticky tires on this club soft top with the Bilstein suspension and be perfectly happy with their performance on track. That's not something I necessarily say about Miatas of old. They tended to be a little bit too soft, but that's different here. The trade-off is that the ride comfort, especially on the highway, is pretty stiff. It's pretty rough. You can see me bouncing around here quite a bit, and that's not something I'm used to in a Miata. I will say from my experience, the RF has been a little bit softer. I'm not sure exact spring rates, but it feels like there's a little bit of a difference in suspension tuning there. We've done a lot of highway miles in this car this week. I'll just go ahead and say it. This is still a Miata. This is not a long distance cruiser. I mean, you can do long distances in this and get great fuel economy, but it's not very comfortable. It's kind of loud. There's a little bit of wind noise from the soft top, though it's better than any Miata has ever been. You know, you've got a decent sound system, but once you get going and all the wind noise comes into the cabin, it kind of drowns anything out over 60 miles an hour. It's bouncy, it's rough, it's still a roadster. You're gonna have your fun and get your thrills in this thing in the city, in low speed environments, on the track, around the autocross, and on a good back road. We have a decent amount of passing torque, even in 6th gear. And I just love the character of this engine. It's so rev happy. This shifter is, Mazda's still doing the best. It's so easy to find the gates that you want. $7,500 RPM red line. And even at high speed, we've got a pretty stable level of aerodynamics from this MX-5. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this 6-speed manual. It is just fantastic. You kind of have to go in and just try one and drive one with these cars to feel it. It's this perfect snick between gears, just the right level of notchiness, but super confidence inspiring. You'll never miss a shift in this car. I think my perfect Miata for performance driving would be something like this with a set of stickier tires and just a nice sounding catback exhaust. Call it a day. Otherwise, lots of creature comforts in here. Cruise control works great. You can skip 5-mile-an-hour increments. No radar guided system or anything, but that kind of, I feel like that would be sacrilege in a Miata that's meant for driving. You do have Apple CarPlay, so you can see Waze and all that good stuff. Very useful, very nice. No bugs, it's an easy system to use. And of course, you know me, once you get used to this Mazda scroll wheel, it's fantastic to use on a daily basis. You kind of gain some muscle memory and learn how many clicks or how many turns gets you to certain parts of the screen. This engine doesn't have a lot of personality in stock form, but I think with an exhaust it sounds pretty good. It just revs to the moon. 7,500 RPM in a Miata is, it's got a little bit of an S2000 vibe where you have to kind of consciously push it a little bit harder to that last 500 to 1,000 RPM. It's a real pleasure. This car is so well balanced, so well tuned. You can really steer this car with the throttle. You have to be a little bit careful. It does have some snappy characteristics. But in the dry, there's a lot of traction here, and it's very predictable. Yesterday I drove a turbo Miata, and it was an NB, and it had about maybe 200 horsepower or so. And it's very interesting because this new Miata almost feels like what a supercharged Miata used to feel like, except we've got the responsiveness and the immediacy of a naturally aspirated motor. There's a good amount of power here. It's definitely another level for Miata people. If you're used to the power level from a supercharged Miata, this is going to feel about the same, which is awesome. Look at that. Amazing rotation. It's so nimble, it's so precise. No new car on the market handles like this. The BRZ and FRS are a joy to drive, but there's a heaviness and a weightiness to those cars, just through the controls and also just physically at the curb weight, that presents itself when you're driving those cars. And the BRZ FRS is a much better daily driver and all-arounder. This Miata is fun, but I wouldn't necessarily want to daily drive it. Also, I'm getting old and just, more sensitive to noise and vibrations and bumps. I'd rather have my Lexus, but, you could daily drive this. It's just a little bit tight. God, it's good to drive. Just a joy. Suspension loads up beautifully around corners. You're not riding on the bump stops anymore like you were when the NDs first came out. There was so much body roll on those cars, they were a little bit sketchy and unpredictable. But there's actually some suspension travel here and a little bit of a stiffer setup all around. Definitely one of those cars where you feel everything. You feel every little bump, every little road imperfection. You can feel the road surface through the chassis, through the steering wheel. They have improved the steering feel in these ND2 Miatas. When the Miata first came out, it was a little bit numb. There was just no communication through the wheel, and now that's much improved. It was interesting because the Fiat 124 Spider had great steering feel, but the Miata didn't when everything launched. And Mazda has gone through and fixed that, and it's no longer an issue in my opinion. I think, to sum this car up, this is the best Miata ever made. It's absolutely fantastic. It does all the things that you would want out of a sports car. When I think of what a sports car is and what I want a sports car to be, this is very, very close. In stock form, straight from the factory. A few little modifications here and there, tailored to your preferences, and I think you've just got a fantastic little performance vehicle. It doesn't get much better than this when you're just looking for something to enjoy driving in. The Miata is one of those cars that is very accessible for most people. It's very affordable, they're reliable, they're cheap to run, and a lot of people who aren't necessarily into sports cars or into cars, this is their first foray into that performance driving genre, and it kind of makes car enthusiasts out of people, and that's definitely what it's done in my family. My parents are not necessarily car people, but they've owned two Miatas, and they have an ND RF, an ND1 RF in their garage, and they absolutely love it. It's my mom's almost daily driver. She drives it a lot. She spends a lot of time behind the wheel, and she loves every moment of it. But it's one of those cars where there's a fantastic community, an amazing aftermarket. There is a real culture of Miatas, and I think it's something that just kind of, it's a community that you buy into. There's the Miata wave. Every time you see another one, you get a little wave that's, whether they've got pop-up headlights, they'll flash their lights at you, or they'll stick their hand out the window. That's a cool level of camaraderie that you don't really get a lot with other vehicles. handling character of this car. You get a little bit of understeer, you get a little bit of push, just ease off the throttle and that front end will dart in. The rear kind of squats under hard acceleration, so you get that extra traction. This engine is super revvy, very responsive. There's a good amount of torque. 4,000 RPM, you get a nice pull from this car. Honestly, that's something you really haven't experienced before in Miatas. This thing feels properly quick. And really the only concession you have with this car is the size. It is small, it is tight, but once you drive it around for a little bit, you get used to it, and it's not that big of a deal. If you fit, you fit. If you don't, well, you kind of know at that point whether you fit or not. I'm 5'10", and I feel just about perfect in this car. But I think if you're pushing over 6 foot, you might struggle just a little bit, especially with the racing helmet. I like how they have kept this car simple too. You know, when they first came out with the screen and this system, I was a little bit concerned that they had tried to make the Miata this complicated modern car. And everything here adds to the experience. They haven't detracted from the purity of driving this car with this new tech and with this new Mazda infotainment. You have everything you need. The climate control dials are easy to use. It's just very simple, very physical. You have heated seat buttons for these fantastic Recaros. I mean, really, if you get a fully loaded Miata, you're paying a lot of money for these seats, and they're fantastic. They have great bolstering. I think if you're really going to be racing and driving one of these cars on track, you're probably going to be wanting an actual race seat, so some type of more aggressive bucket situation. But from the factory, these do a really good job of keeping you held in under performance driving situations. So I do like these Recaros. They're very comfortable. No issues there. Beyond something like a Caterham or an S2000, it doesn't really get much better than a Miata. For a new car, for sale today, with all the safety stuff, the factory warranty, the reliability, the Apple CarPlay, the infotainment, the reasonably good sound system, which we'll test here in a second, it's really hard to beat this. I'd take this over like a new Cayman or a new Boxster. Those are getting very expensive. This feels luxurious. This feels nice. It feels like it's built to a higher price point. And these are getting expensive. This is a $35,000 Miata with its options. You can get into one of these for 30 grand, and that's probably what I would recommend. But you know, you feel like you're getting a higher quality item. Really, the only complaint I have with this car's quality and interior build is some of the materials, like this rubber here, gets a little bit scratched up. The steering wheel, the plastic here, once you scratch it, there's really no going back. You just got to kind of replace that piece. Let's go in and listen to a sound system test here. See what the sound system is like. For a Miata, it's actually not too bad. For when you compare it to other vehicles, it's not that great. But at low speeds, it sounds pretty good.
550 on the 5 sticky, come get high with me, that's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky, come get high with me, that's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
Hopefully that gives you guys a pretty good idea of the sound system. Once you get up to higher speeds, a lot of the clear tones and the bass and the treble and the beautiful noises that it makes get drowned out with wind noise from the soft top. So just something to note, but around town, just cruising, it actually sounds pretty darn good. Pedals are just perfectly placed for heel toe. It's like you just get in this car, you plug your brain into the OBD2, and you're set. You can just drive this thing, enjoy it, and feel like you are really one with the car. All right, guys. Of course, we have an adjustable steering wheel now, so lots of adjustability there. Mazda's let us keep this for 2 weeks. I wonder if they really need it back. Wouldn't mind holding on to it for the winter. Throw some Blizzaks on there, slide it around everywhere. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's going to sum up the Miata. We give the keys back tomorrow. Speaking of which, I'm not entirely sold on this new key fob from Mazda. It feels kind of light and cheap, but their cars are so good, who cares? That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, guys. We will see you in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Check out my Instagram at TheTopher2. And yeah, until then, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.